What's up, everybody? Back with another one, shooting it straight with myself, Justin Jackson, and my guy, the guy that makes everything happen behind the scenes, producer John. We've actually got a game to talk about that goes down in the win-loss column. I think when we look at this team going into this season, there's a lot of things that we thought that we really liked. That if they were able to do on the court, I think they could be really good. And I think Monday was the first glimpse of kind of some of the things that this new look team brings. I think when you look at the game, the way it started, I think is going to be the perfect picture of how North Carolina basketball should be this year. The past couple of years, we've talked about all it's been is just force feeding Mondo, point guards trying to isolate and get, shots off and kind of, I guess, us almost hoping that they can make enough outside threes to be able to open things up enough for the inside game. And so when you watch the way this game starts, it starts off with back-to-back threes. It starts off with Mondo's dunk inside and then boom, back-to-back threes. And I think, they only hit 7 of them, 7 of 20 for the game. But when you watch the way that these threes happened and the way that they shoot them, there's a different level of confidence whenever I see these guys shoot, you know? Not that they didn't have guys before that could knock down from the perimeter, but when I watch some of these guys shoot, it's just you almost expect them to make it. And they shot some shots last night that I don't think we've really seen them shoot the last couple years. It was transition pull up threes. It was off of dribble handoffs, shoot behind the screen threes that we haven't really seen much of. And so, you see that, and then you really start to see the picture of how the outside shooting can really create problems for other things. I'll always go back. RJ and Mondo are kind of um, the main catalyst of this team, but when you see the outside shooting, all of a sudden now the picture of the defense guarding this team, the inside is wide open. Obviously, I think Radford had a few bigs that were down, but now you leave Mondo one on one down low against somebody that he's more than likely going to win the battle against in most situations. So I think that's why you saw Mondo play the way that he did. It's still one of the things that I always go back with Mondo though is, man, he could have had about 40, just based off of some of the little bunnies that he missed, and I'm sure he's kind of kicking himself over some of those. But obviously Mondo started off extremely well, and you also saw obviously RJ didn't shoot the ball, as well I think as we're used to seeing, but he was able to get downhill a lot because of the spacing. He was able to get open shots, and I think that's a big key for this team.
Yeah, as you said, RJ Davis shot 6 of 14 last night, 1 of 5 from 3. So as well as UNC played, there's still tons of room for improvement across the board. It was an 86-70 win over Radford in the first game of the season. In this episode of Shooting It Straight, we are going to get into all the details. I do want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our sponsors as well. We have 2 sponsors on this show, Johnny T-Shirt, who sponsors all of Inside Carolina's shows. So if you're in the market for some new UNC gear ahead of basketball season, head over to Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street or to their store, johnnytshirt.com. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Congruity HR. They are a North Carolina-based HR provider. They empower small and mid-sized businesses. So if you are in the market for that, check out congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Let them know that Inside Carolina and the Shooting It Straight podcast sent them your way. Justin, let's get back into the game a little bit. UNC, as you said, got off to a really hot shooting start. They made their first 5 3-point attempts, and also 4 different starters made threes for UNC. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you saw across the board from UNC's shooting? How do you think the Tar Heels looked in that department in the first game of the season?
Yeah, and I think, obviously 7 for 20 isn't necessarily great numbers on paper, um, but it was good enough to open things up, like I said, inside. I think a lot of the things, a lot of the shots that they came off of great actions. You saw Paxton's first shot that he had was off of a down screen, and he kind of read his defender the way he was guarding him, and flared back to the corner. And so I think when I watch it, even though they only hit 7 threes, there's so many opportunities for these shooters to get open looks because of the things that they're running. And I think, like I said, when Pack shoots it, when Cormac shoots it, when RJ shoots it, even when Harrison shoots it, like I have a confidence level of them knocking down those shots, which for me personally, I can't necessarily say I had the last couple years. And so I think that's something that's very exciting and should be really, really good and really enjoyable to watch as the season goes on. I think, that kind of goes right into, you know, exactly what this team, I think its identity is going to be and what it has been, and that's Mondo inside. I was watching Coach Davis's press conference, and he had mentioned that he always tells the guys that we need to get basically rim pressure. So rim pressure is just getting either a dribble drive or getting the ball inside to attack the rim. And um, when there was a certain play in the game that I saw that was totally different. And I hate to keep going back to prior years, but it was totally different from kind of a picture that I saw on a consistent basis. But they passed the ball into Mondo, and it was four guys around him inside, and there was nobody that was helping. There's nobody in the paint. There was nobody digging, helping off the guy that passed it because they couldn't. It was Harrison, Pax, Cormac, and RJ all around Mondo, and so when you see that kind of picture, obviously he's already accomplished a ton in North Carolina, but within college basketball, he's one of the most dominant bigs. And so now you leave him playing against either one on one or because of the spacing, it creates a tougher double team for the defense to have to come over and double him. And so now that they have to come from further because of the spacing, it's easier for Mondo to make a decision. Okay, I got to make a quick move and go score. Or I see him coming. Now I can get the ball out. I can, make plays for somebody else. Somebody's got to be open with this double team coming. So I think that's going to allow him to really expand this offense even more. Years prior, the double team was already there before they even passed the ball into him. There was already somebody in the middle of the paint ready to go. You can't do that now. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that's a great start. I think one thing we have to talk about is obviously I know probably most fans are thinking, oh, Radford, we should have blown him out from the jump and that kind of stuff. I think this was the perfect start of a game. I think that this was literally the perfect start that this North Carolina team could have had from the standpoint of Radford is a quality basketball team. They had some guards that were making some really tough shots. They had some, guys that were making some plays for them offensively, and they were fighting inside as much as they possibly could. But they weathered the storm going into the second half. I think there was a span. I think it was from like 15. Yeah, it was from 15 minutes in the second half to about 6.5 minutes. They held them to 6 points. So for basically almost 9 minutes, they held Radford to 6 points. And I think a lot of that was kind of the defensive energy and effort that you saw them have. I think they started picking up full court a little bit more. They started getting up into the ball. You saw a lot more of, Radford was having to get shots off at the end of the shot clock, which is really, I think that's a big key for this team. Offensively, I don't think they're going to have an issue scoring the ball. But I think defensively, seeing the effort and the energy that they had on that end was big. Guys like Seth coming in defensively causing some issues. Even Elliott coming in and picking up the ball full court and trying to get up into his man a little bit. I think caused some issues for Radford a little bit. But then you also look at 8 turnovers in the first half and 3 turnovers in the second. Um, so in a game like this, really all you're looking for is to get better and better as the game goes on. Radford's going to come out with a lot of energy. They're probably going to come out, they've got nothing to lose at the end of the day. And so, and at the same time, this is a team with 5, 6 brand new guys. And like we talked about before, the gelling is going to take a little bit of time. But I think really when you watch this team, they look like they had been playing with each other for a while. They look like they knew exactly where certain guys wanted the ball, certain actions that guys wanted to run defensively. They were able to switch 1 through 4, 1 through 5 sometimes, with really no issue, no miscommunication. You might have seen, a few times where there was some miscommunication, but for the most part, everybody was on the same page. So I think this game was, when I was watching it, it was obviously we would love for them to just come out and just blow them out by 40, but I think with a game like that, they did exactly what a good team needs to do, and that's just to continue to weather the storm and get better as the game goes on. So I think that was a great sign for this team.
Yeah, and to your point about Radford, they had 28 field goals and only 5 assists. So I think that shows a little bit. They were hitting some tough shots, but as the game went along, and this is something that Hubert Davis talked about in one of his post-game availabilities, UNC kind of wore Radford down a little bit. Maybe some of those shots that were dropping in the first half, maybe we're hitting the front of the rim in the second half. So I think that speaks a little bit to the depth as well of UNC's roster. They played 11 guys last night, really 10 guys because Okonkwo only came in there for a minute there at the end. But we got to see Jalen Washington play pretty well. Jalen Withers kind of stood out in his limited minutes that he played. Obviously, Cadeau came off the bench. From those set of guys on the bench, who kind of maybe sparked the most for you?
It's interesting because I think when it comes to the whole question of who's going to play from the bench, how's the rotation going to happen from the bench, um, as I was looking back, I even texted Theo yesterday to ask him kind of how many minutes did the guys whenever I was at school or when we were at school, how many minutes did guys off the bench play? And they played about the same amount that some of these guys played off the bench on Monday. Obviously we probably had like 3 or 4 guys that played about, 15 minutes, but um, all you need from guys who are coming off the bench is to bring energy defensively, whatever their skill set might be. When you see like a guy like Withers come off the bench, you see an athlete, a guy who can switch 1 through 5, basically offensive rebound, attack off the dribble to get downhill. And so, you just need him to come in and do that extremely hard for those 15 minutes or however long he might play off the bench. You see a guy like Zayden come in and he brings nothing but energy. Um, and then a guy like Elliott, you just need him to come in and play make. I think there was, I think RJ as a point guard, I think he only had 2 assists, something like that. But a lot of
Mhm.
that was because of him not necessarily being the main playmaker on the court. And a big reason of that was Elliott. He came in, he had what 6 assists. He led the team um, in assists, and a lot of those were obviously great passes and getting downhill, attacking the rim, and then making plays for other people. So that's really all you need from guys who are coming off the bench is just to come in and be themselves and play with a lot of energy. And I think you saw everybody that came off the bench did that. Um, and I think going off of kind of some guys that I think kind of stood out. I'm already. Let me know if you want to hop on the Harrison bandwagon, man. We've got plenty of space because I think when I watched the game, his stat line wasn't crazy. It wasn't like he had 30 and 20, but when I watched the game, he was effective in every area that you would need somebody to be effective in. He was defensively, like we said, with them switching, with them starting 1 through 4, and him being the 4. it's like switching another guard onto a guard. So, I think you saw that. He had a couple, blocks where he was defending a drive and then was able just to go up without fouling and, you know, block the shot. Um, so defensively, he was able to do that. Rebounding is never an issue with him. And then you look on offense, obviously we talk about RJ and as him being the point guard. I think a lot of times Harrison is kind of the point guard of that team per se. RJ might be the guy who brings the ball up and maybe initiates the offense, but when it comes to really making plays and getting guys open and things like that, I think a lot of the game you saw Harrison kind of being that guy. There was a play in the second half where I think he drove, didn't have anything, so then he posted up, backed his man down a little bit, and then threw basically a hook pass over to Cormac over in the corner, and he knocked down a three. I think there was a few times where you saw him in the post being able to take advantage of smaller guards. And then obviously he had a few threes that he knocked down. Had a couple drives, had a couple, drive to kicks. So I think watching him, he's so steady. He's consistent. Obviously, he's got to continue to do it throughout the season. It's just the first game, but when I watched everything that he did, he was effective at all levels, all spots that he was in. He was effective, and um, I think that was really, just kind of backing up my point of how important he is for this team, and hopefully he can continue to bring that out.
Yeah, that was something that was surprising to me watching him. It was sort of my first extended chance to watch Harrison at UNC. He was a little bit more physical than you expected. And it wasn't like a Pete Nance where he's kind of posting up and then fading away into sort of a fall away jumper. He was not afraid to kind of use his strength and his size and to get right to the rim. So I think that is definitely a needed skill set for UNC, as you said, for switching as well. I want to come back to Cadeau because I think he's just going to be so important to this team. You referenced it already. He had 6 assists against 2 turnovers. I think another thing that Cadeau was doing was really trying to push the ball up the court and being really aggressive with it. If you're playing with a guard like that who's going to make that throw ahead pass, does that kind of change how you're approaching offense? Are you running back a little bit harder knowing that that pass could be coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the wings guards is to run in transition. I think that's their number one job when it goes from defense to offense. Wings get out in transition, but it gives you a little bit more uh, excitement to get out and run in transition, knowing that there's somebody that might be able to kick you the ball ahead. Um, and I think Elliott, it goes right back to what we were kind of talking about with Coach Davis. Like he wants them to put pressure on the rim, whether that's getting the ball inside to Armando or it's driving to the basket and putting pressure on the rim that way. And when you watch Elliott, I mean, I think we talk about his pace and how he plays at his own pace, but the way he gets out in transition, it looks very similar to how old North Carolina point guards were always known to play when it came to transition. There was one play where I think it ended up being a turnover. I think Zayden might have tripped and fallen, but there was one play where he got the ball in the outlet, took one dribble, and threw a bounce pass up to Zayden up the middle of the floor, and that just makes people want to run because that he's looking for you. I think what he had 5 points. All game. I think he only had 5. He only shot a few times. So knowing that you have somebody that's really looking to get other people involved, it makes the energy of the basketball is so much better. I think that's something that most fans don't really fully comprehend. But when the ball is moving and everybody's touching it, and everybody's getting the ball in certain scoring situations or with the ability to make a play, something about the energy of the basketball just is so much better as opposed to, if you have one guy that's just trying to isolate every time and trying to go get their bucket every time, it kind of causes people to kind of not enjoy playing as much. So, having a guy like Elliott offensively is amazing, but I think really, even on the other end, like to see him pick up full court and to put that pressure on the point guard. Yeah, I mean, I think he got scored on a couple times. That happens in basketball, but causing their offense to start higher on the floor or picking them up full court and making them start, with 20 seconds on the shot clock as opposed to 25 seconds on the shot clock is a huge difference compared to them just running their offense just comfortably and being able to do it, whatever they want. I think that also it's kind of Elliott and Seth. Whenever you saw Seth come into the ball, he kind of into the game, he kind of got into the ball and people call it heated the ball up a little bit, but basically just made the ball handler kind of turn his back and make sure that he doesn't turn the ball over first, which is huge because now you take them out of their offensive play that the coach wanted them to run, and now they're trying to do something out of character or whatever that might be with the shot clock running down. So I think those were huge things defensively. I think just kind of seeing it, and like we talked about, as the game went on, they got better. The energy and the pickup and the full court pressure, it got better as the game went on. And against a team like this, for one, you can't give a team like that too much confidence because there's really no telling what might happen. But for them to weather kind of like you talked about 20 something field goals to 5 assists. I mean, it's like sometimes you got to tip your cap to the offense, and you just got to keep on playing because eventually everything's going to even out. So to see that stuff from him, from Elliott, and then also I keep on mentioning Seth. He played a few minutes, and when he came in, you knew he was on the floor. And I think for a guy coming off the bench, that's what you need. And so when you watch that, I think that's big for this team, and hopefully they can continue doing that.
Yeah, and like you said too, they complement each other. Elliott knows he can pick up full court. If he needs a breather, he's got Seth to come right in and just keep the intensity up and keep it going. I wanted to bring this stat in as well with Elliott. He led the Tar Heels with 6 assists, as we talked about. It's the most assists by a freshman in a North Carolina debut since Bobby Frazier recorded 7 against Gardner Webb in the 2005-2006 season. So that's pretty impressive for Elliott. I think his playmaking is going to be really needed on this team as well because he kind of opens up the offense. It seems like, though, the playmaking isn't just coming from RJ and Armando and maybe Elliott. It feels like the playmaking is pretty widely distributed. When you look across the box score, there are assists sprinkled in by everyone. We already talked about Harrison a little bit. He had 3 assists. Paxton Wojcik and Cormac Ryan, they both had 3 assists, which was interesting for their first game.
Mhm.
You don't think of them as traditional playmakers, but maybe they're ball movers. They keep the ball moving around the court, adding some more energy to the basketball, like you said. And one more thing on Paxton, I love to see this. He took a big cut in the pregame. He's out there fighting through that. And then one of the last possessions of the game, he set a great sort of back screen or cross screen to free up a 3-pointer there at the end. So I like to see that as well. Shooters who aren't just invested in getting their own shot, but freeing up with a tough screen. I believe it was Cormac who hit one of the last threes of the game there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very underrated skill to be able to be a shooter, but also play off of closeouts. Um, a lot of times whenever you're in a scout, depending on who if you're playing against a really good shooter, a lot of times you want to try to get them inside the 3-point line because they can really get hot from outside the 3-point line, but when their percentages drop a little bit once you get them inside 3-point line. So with shooters like Pax and Cormac and RJ and even like a guy like Harrison, when teams now they have to respect their 3-point shooting so much. Now when teams start running them off the line, now that's whenever they can start making plays for other people or themselves, and I think that's why you kind of saw the box score look the way that it did when it came to the assist column because now you have to run Cormac off the line. And when Cormac gets off the line, he's smart enough. He's played enough college basketball that now he can make certain reads um, that need to be made. When Pax gets the ball, if he doesn't have the shot, for sure he's going to be able to drive and make the play. I mean, I think there was even a first. It's funny because as I'm watching the game, there's certain plays where we didn't even really get anything out of it. But for me, it was encouraging to see those plays happen. There was a play in the first half where Pax, somebody ran him off the line, he pump faked, he drove in, and he tried to look for a lob to Armando down low. But I think Radford came in and stole it, or it was just a miscommunication. But plays like that, I think, are plays that we're gonna see pretty consistently because people are going to have to run these guys off the line. And once again, it's something that we just haven't seen in a while, right? Like you see guys that are more willing to just help and then short closeout, which short closeout obviously is if it's somebody that you don't necessarily respect a ton shooting, you're going to close out a little bit before the 3-point line and hope that they shoot the ball as opposed to drive it. And so now you see guys having to run all the way to the 3-point line, and that just creates so many more driving lanes, so many more um, places to make plays for other people. And I think that's kind of the difference. Is just it starts with the threat of the outside shooting, and it's it's just different. I think when you really watch it, it's refreshing, and it's like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for this offense to have, and this is what this team has needed. um and I think that's kind of what is so exciting for me, is just even after the first game, it's you know and 23s, I think, is you're going to see that averaged throughout the season. I think you're going to see that maybe more throughout the year. I think there's going to be some games where they might go 12 for 20, and I think that's just going to cause more and more issues whenever it comes to teams scouting them and trying to figure out, okay, now we have to figure out, can we double Mondo down low? Because anytime we go, he's able to kick it out to somebody that's going to be ready to knock down a 3-point shot or be able to play off of a closeout and have our team defensively in rotations. And I think that just can create so many problems for teams. So I think that's super, super encouraging for me going forward. So hopefully they can continue to play together. I think that's another thing that I think we haven't really talked about a ton, but how much they really played together. It's one of those things where it's a brand new team, first game, everybody's wanting to kind of get their jitters out and wanting to kind of get their first buckets and be aggressive offensively, but that ball was moving. You saw a few plays, everybody touched the ball, got inside, got back outside, and then all of a sudden got the ball back inside for Mondo to finish at the rim. And it's just fun to watch. It's fun basketball. It's basketball played the right way. And obviously there's some things they can fix a little bit. Mondo can finish some of those bunnies. I think RJ had a few drives where he could probably finish or do something different at the rim. Whenever he gets in there and things like that. But it's just a lot more encouraging signs for me than whenever we started the season. Last year, the year before.
Yeah, I think you see the experience as well. This was a crazy stat to me. The Tar Heels' 5 starters had a combined 416 college starts heading into last night. 416 in this era of college basketball, too, with so much player movement. UNC has put together a roster that has so much experience, and you saw that too, maybe a little bit in the second half as well. Maybe a younger team would be a little bit nervous. Obviously, no one wants to lose the first game of the year, especially a game that you're not supposed to lose. But I did not sense at all. There was no panic. There was no, hey, let me go try to do this myself, take a quick three, anything like that. So I think that is something you're saying as well, Justin. The experience of this team really stood out.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I saw a stat. Cormac's what, 25?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, for one, that's 3 years younger than me, but
Yeah.
uh, you know,
And you
that's
last played
nothing.
in 2017.
Yeah,
So
right,
you've been
right.
out for a while.
And so it's like That right there, I mean, he's seen so much more college basketball than a majority of the players that they're going to play against. And so, I mean, you even see him, an older guy. He got a steal in the second half, got out, or I think maybe first half, got a transition. I think Harrison got an and one layup, and you kind of saw the energy and the celebration, the excitement that he had, even as an older guy. And so, like you said, I mean, it's college basketball is all about experience. Experience is the best teacher, and when you have a ton of guys that have experienced a lot, I think it's going to make the transition of a brand new team even easier.
Yeah. You referenced it. It was game one. The next game for the Tar Heels is this Sunday. They play Lehigh at 2 p.m. And then they have UC Riverside and Northern Iowa after that to kind of kick off this early slate of the season. Speaking of first games of the season, I want to actually take us into the time machine here. Take us back to 2014, November 14th. UNC rolled out a lineup of Marcus Page, Justin Jackson, Bryce Johnson, Kennedy Meeks, and Theo Pinson in the first game of the season. Justin, we wanted to ask you a little bit since a lot of Tar Heels just played in their first game in the Dean E. Smith Center, first game in a Carolina uniform. We wanted to ask you about your first game for the Tar Heels. What was that experience like playing against North Carolina Central?
You know what's crazy is I want to back it up a little bit more, because when you had mentioned this to me, I had to really go back and like watch and even look at what the schedule was of that year. Um, and it reminded me about uh, how this journey of college basketball can be a very up and down situation. I think we had late night at that time. It was called Late Night with Roy. We had late night, and I want to say maybe I was the leading scorer in late night, and um, I was feeling good about myself as a freshman. You're like, okay, I want to set the tone. I want to kind of let everybody know what I'm about and what I'm here to do. And I want to say late night, I was leading scorer maybe. First couple exhibition games, I want to say I probably averaged maybe 15 or something like that. So I felt really, really good. And then all of a sudden, you go into the game, NC Central, and I think you said what 9-3 and something, um,
9, 5, and 3 assists. Yeah.
9-5 and 3, and I prior to that game, it was like, man, like the coaches, they gotta run things for me. Like I'm already shown that I'm here, like I'm ready. And we go into that game and uh I was blessed to start and play a ton of minutes like from the jump. So I definitely have that leg up when it comes to being a freshman. Um, but it was like I was just kind of, within the flow of the game. It was like, okay, I'll get a transition layup or I'll get offensive rebound layup or, that kind of thing. It really wasn't like, running, hey, get Justin a shot or whatever, which is totally different as a freshman because in high school, every single play for you is to get you a shot, like every play. Um, and so, yeah, I'll never forget kind of that mindset that I had going into the game. And then it was like, okay, well, I guess I got to find kind of where I fit into this whole scheme because obviously I had a guy like Marcus Page who was the face of our team at the time. I had a guy like Bryce who was just ready to blow up within college basketball anytime. And I had guys who had already been there who were dominant inside like Kennedy, Isaiah, and JP who was already there as well. Kind of at that wing position that had been through it, and it was just trying to find my situations and trying to find where I fit into kind of what was already set there. Um, because one thing about Coach Williams is rarely did he ever change what he had already going on for a new player, and which obviously won him multiple championships and won him a ton of basketball games. So I'll never forget that. The game itself I can forget, but the mindset that I had going in, like, okay, yeah, this is it. And now as I'm older and even my sophomore and junior year, I realized that for one, late night was basically glorified pickup. It wasn't anywhere close to regular games. The exhibition games were usually against lower tier teams, and it wasn't um, anywhere close to the same difficulty level of a regular game. And I had to take that one on the chin a little bit when it came to my ego and my pride, and kind of go forward with that. And I'll never forget as a freshman, we got into a locker room one time, and we're sitting in there, and Coach Davis was, I think, I want to say that was maybe his maybe first or second year as an assistant. And it's funny that it's Coach Davis now that he's the head coach, but we're sitting in there, we were struggling, and Coach Davis would rarely say anything when it came to halftime. If anything, it'd be like something encouraging or something like that. And we're sitting there, and he goes, "Hey guys," and he points to Marcus, and he's like, "Hey, that guy's a pretty good player. I think we need to get him the ball and get him more shots." Meaning to everybody else, either set him a screen or when you have the ball, look for him. Um, and I always give Marcus a hard time for that because I'm like, hey, bro, from that point on, I felt like all I was doing was setting a screen. I would go from one screen, look around, try to set another screen. And, as a freshman, those are just things you have to try to figure out. You've got to figure out where you fit in, the things that you need to do to help the team. And, um, then also the places and the areas that you can be aggressive when you get the ball. And it's just a learning curve and a learning experience that's different than anything you've ever experienced, in your basketball career up to that point. So it was cool to go back and kind of think about kind of how I felt that year. So yeah, that's my first game at UNC, and first couple experience of being on the court while I was at UNC my freshman year. So it was, you know, definitely a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, hearing you talk about that reminds me a little bit of Cadeau's first game. He's kind of feeling things out, those early turnovers. It's part of the process. Game one, it's not a finished product at all. Also, I want to say Theo Pinson in that game, 4 points, uh, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. So when you see him this week at practice, you can remind him that you outscored him in both of y'all's first game with the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I already give him hard enough time um, when it came to that because I think also the backstory with that, something happened with JP. That was the reason he wasn't starting, because that's the reason Theo started that game. But obviously now Theo's played in the NBA for a while, made a bunch of money for him and his family, and now it's just a little friendly banter back and forth now. But I for sure will let him know, hey man, you had 4 points, bro. Good job, man. It's impressive. But I'll for sure give him a hard time.
I don't think that's the only time that you outscored him over the course of your UNC careers either. So you might have that on him. But yeah, as we talked about with this show, we'll be coming to you every single week during college basketball season on Thursdays. So keep an eye out for next week's episode, recapping game 2 of the season. Justin, any final thoughts before we close out today?
Man, same thing. I'll always say thank you to everybody that's tuning in, everybody that's watching or listening. We definitely appreciate it. I enjoy this a ton. Obviously, John is the guy that makes everything happen behind the scenes. I just get to come on here and talk a little bit. Get to hear my voice a little bit. So we appreciate every one of y'all. Um, like I said before, just continue to be fans, continue to be the best fans in the country, supporting these guys. It's one game of hopefully many wins that they'll have going forward. There's things that they can do better, but there's also a ton of things that they, did right and really well. And I think it's something that's very encouraging for me, and hopefully it's encouraging for everybody that's watching UNC basketball, watching this podcast. So yeah, we appreciate y'all, and be ready for another one next week.